In many countries around the world, rivers like this one are the dumping ground for large amounts of wastewater and sewage. Sometimes as much as 50% or more, sometimes even up to 90% of the flow may be actually wastewater and sewage. This causes tremendous stress on the natural ecosystems in the river. Whilst in many cases we have the saying that dilution is the solution to pollution, in cases where there is a very large amount of sewage dumped into rivers, rivers just cannot cope, and this puts them under severe stress. What this means is that the natural dynamics of the river are no longer allowed to function, and the water gets dirtier and dirtier and eventually becomes essentially just dead water. In this edition of Straight Talk, I want to talk about environmental flows. These are the flows which we allow down the rivers to help flush out salinity, to encourage biodiversity, to improve fish habitat, and also to help the processes that clean up water and provide mankind with the type of services that are so important to us in terms of provision of fresh, clean water. There is no universally accepted definition of environmental flows. They apply to a wide range of water bodies. These include streams, rivers, lakes, estuaries, floodplains, and also groundwater dependent ecosystems. What's really critical is that we consider both the seasonality, the total amount, and the variability of the flow in terms of their assessment and their use. What we need to do is to maintain environmental flows that mimic to the best extent possible natural systems. Otherwise we end up with basins which close and never flow to the sea, as has happened, for example, in the Colorado and the Murray-Darling Basin in Australia and the Krishna in India, and wetlands that dry up and become totally degraded, and we start to lose really important environmental services, including fisheries and supplies of fresh water, not to mention biodiversity. It's really important that we consider environmental flows when we're allocating water. This is really difficult in many developing countries where there is considerable pressure from other users on water. Those users include agriculture, industry and domestic uses. However, what we need to be thinking about is setting aside an allocation of water first for the environment and then dividing up the remainder subsequently so that all users and the environment get taken into account. It really isn't satisfactory just to give the environment what is left after all other users have taken their share. We know that there is growing competition and demand for water. This means that we will not have unlimited resources for environmental flows. We have therefore, in terms of planning, to determine what are the most significant environmental assets in any river basin system. These might include the in-stream processes and wetland processes that help clean up water, which we can reuse for drinking. They may include fisheries habitat. They may include the preservation of biodiversity, or they may include the flushing of salts and other pollutants from the system. Once we know what we want to protect, we have to then make sure we understand the dynamics of the river basin system so that these can be best protected through carefully measured and chosen environmental flows. The really difficult thing with environmental flows is knowing exactly how to determine the amounts and then to monitor the results and outcomes of allowing those environmental flows. There are, however, a number of scientific methods which do help us determine the amount required for specific river basins, and these vary very much from country to country and from river regime to river regime. And there are means of monitoring the outcomes in terms of monitoring water quality, monitoring the habitat in the river through the types of species, both vertebrates and invertebrates. Whilst the benefits that arise from environmental flows are quite clear in many cases, there is still often controversy about how much water should go to the environment and how much should go to what are described as more productive uses of water, including domestic, industrial and agricultural use. This is a question that is a really hard one for policymakers to determine, but it's important scientifically that we provide them the best evidence, not only in terms of the physical requirements, but also in terms of the costs and benefits of maintaining our rivers in reasonably good condition so that we can benefit ourselves from all the services that are provided, and in particular the provision of fresh water for all humankind's uses. It's really important, therefore, that we set aside some amount of water for environmental flows. These are really critical in terms of the sustainability of our future systems, in terms of maintaining biodiversity, in providing fresh water, and also in terms of reducing the costs of water treatment. This is Colin Chartres at the International Water Management Institute.